The following production is part of the Play Some Video Games podcast network.
I say it's time we focus on what really matters. The games. Who's with me?
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the PlayStation Experience podcast. My name is Seth, and I'm one of your hosts, flying solo this week. It's been a little while, and I apologize for that. It's just been, it's been busy time. But this is September, and at PSVG, this is the September to remember. So this is the September that I remembered to record this podcast. It's a little bit of a joke, but so we're gonna do something a little bit different this show, and eventually we'll get back on to more of the conversational podcast. But for now, to kind of get things going and kind of keep the PlayStation experience going, it's just going to be me for right now. But each week I want to dive into kind of a segment of the PlayStation gaming history and kind of look back at where we've come. It is September 2019. We're figuring by this time next year we will be maybe 2 months out from PlayStation 5 coming out. So it's this next 12, 14 months is going to be pretty exciting. Still have some great games coming up for the PS4, and then of course the PlayStation 5 is going to be muy exciting. Before I dive into what I'm going to be doing for this show, I do want to take a moment and thank all of our PSVG Patreon producers: Edwin Callow, Barry Cathcart, Josh Borboni, Chris M., Devin Tyus, Paul Calicote, Kyle Hyman, Benny Liu, and Joe Voss / Professor Switch. Thank each and every one of you, and thank everybody who supports us on Patreon, who listens to us, who interacts with us. However you are connected to the Play Some Video Games cinematic universe, I just thank you. This really is a cool group, and I've been excited listening to what's been going on elsewhere in PSVG, over on Nintendo Shack with Per Schneider and the PSVG Prime with Watch Dogs person whose name escapes me right now, and I apologize for that. But this really is some pretty cool stuff going on. So, the meat of today's show, I'm going to be looking at 989 Studios, which has a long history going back to 1989. Before I get into that, so that's a little teaser as to what most of this show is going to be about. I did want to touch on a couple of PlayStation news items that I've missed in my kind of month's absence here. I also wanted to make a note. This is actually the 50th episode of the PlayStation Experience podcast here on the PSVG podcast network, which is pretty cool. We still got a long way to go, and hope to be here, a year from now, celebrating episode 100 and getting ready for the PlayStation 5 launch, which hopefully in that time I will prove to Donnie and he will buy me a PlayStation 5. That is the goal. So anyway, that's kind of a joke. I'll start off with this week's new releases. Coming to the PlayStation 4 console this week, we've got a lot of games. Some games I've seen elsewhere, actually. Agatha Knife, I know, is on Switch. There's a game called Blasphemous. And then, of course, the biggie this week is Borderlands 3 coming out. The original looter-shooter returns, packing bazillions of guns in a mayhem-fueled adventure. Blast through new worlds and enemies as one of 4 new Vault Hunters. Play solo or with friends to take on insane enemies, score loads of loot, and save your home from the most ruthless cult leaders in the galaxy. A lot of people looking forward to that. I played the pre-sequel. No, not the pre-sequel. Borderlands 2. It came free on PlayStation Plus a few months ago, and the Handsome Jack collection. I tried Borderlands 2, and I'm sure that it's better with friends, but it just did not click with me. That's all right. Excuse me. Another big game coming out this week: eFootball PES 2020. That is Pro Evolution Soccer is one of the two big soccer games in the world that comes out every year. Of course, this one is missing most of the the FIFA licenses that EA Sports FIFA has, but it looks like it should be a good game. That's coming out. Greedfall is one that a lot of people are excited for. Looks really interesting. It is from a team that has made some other games. I think the Technomancer, and there's another game that they made as well. It's an RPG, quote unquote Western RPG. Greedfall is a completely new world. This is coming from a PlayStation blog post about Greedfall. The world of Greedfall is inspired by 17th century history and the sense of wonder and exploration that permeated society due to new discoveries in countless fields. The game has echoes of colonial themes, yet doesn't mirror history in this respect. What happens is up to you. The world of Greedfall is full of different people and factions, quests and creatures, and everything has a history and a reason for being there. Whether you delve into these mysteries or not is your choice. So, that sounds pretty promising. I've seen in some other areas, I think it was the promo video for Greedfall. Someone calls this a game that BioWare fans should pay attention to, which I love Mass Effect, the original trilogy. So I'm interested in this one. Sounds pretty cool. The other points this blog post makes: Tir Frady is an island full of promises. In Greedfall, you embark from the old continent to the island of Tir Frady, I don't know. The new world, full of wilderness and new environments to explore. Forests, mountains, swamps, and cities will draw you in, but keep a wary eye out for the many strange creatures that prowl there. It looks like a cool game. I don't know if I'll get into it. It talks about difficulty a little bit. There are 4 game difficulties that significantly alter the kind of experience you can expect. On one end, you have the more story-driven experience, focusing on the characters and diplomacy over combat. On the other, you have a more combat-focused mode for stat heads and RPG experts. Basically, if all of this works the way that this blog post is describing, Greedfall sounds pretty awesome. I am somewhat skeptical that it will work quite like that, but one can hope. So hopefully that's a great game. Other big games coming out this week: NASCAR Heat 4 looks really good. I've heard the handling model is much better than past editions of NASCAR Heat. I think the NASCAR Heat series is interesting. They have a pretty neat career mode. And of course, if you like NASCAR, it's the only NASCAR game out there for you, really. But I've always had trouble with the handling, and with especially when you start bumping into cars, it's pretty easy to spin out. Supposedly they fixed that. So the game looks good. It's another NASCAR Heat game. NHL 2020. NHL 20 is also out this week. I actually, as part of EA Access, just downloaded the trial and have not booted it up yet, but hope to soon. I always enjoyed playing the NHL games. Back to NHL 94, which is hard to believe, was 25 years ago. Maybe 26. I don't know when that game was released, but I I'm looking forward to diving into NHL 20. I'll probably suck at it, but that's all right. Looks like the other games here, The Walking Dead, the Telltale Definitive Series, looks like the whole thing is being released in one set. All 4 seasons, 400 days, and The Walking Dead Michonne, which includes over 50 hours of gameplay across 23 unique episodes. That's a lot of depression and darkness. Is what that is. And then finally, WRC 8 FIA World Rally Championship, the official World Rally Championship game. I believe this is developed by Kiloton, which makes perfectly competent racing games. They're fine. In a year where Dirt Rally 2.0 came out. And actually, Dirt Rally 2.0 just released. You can buy a bundle that includes the first 4 seasons worth of DLC content, which is an additional 24 cars. It doesn't feature the official World Rally Championship tracks, but I have to imagine that if you're really into rally, you're playing Dirt Rally 2.0. So before I move on to, I'm going to touch base on a couple other news items. Did want to take a moment to say what I've been playing. Basically, what I have been playing on the PlayStation 4 home entertainment console is Wreckfest. Wreckfest is a game I've been waiting on for... It's been in development for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I don't know exactly, but I've been waiting on it for at least the past 2 years since it was originally announced that it would be coming to console. And finally it came in August, end of August, and that's basically the only game, aside from Apex Legends, basically the only game I've been playing on PlayStation. It's a really good game. It's an arcade sim racer. There's nothing too sim heavy about it. You're not managing, intricate stats. You're not, it's not a serious racer like Gran Turismo, which I love Gran Turismo, but, there you're, always worried about bumping into people. And really in Wreckfest, if you bump into people the wrong way, you're going to spin yourself out. Other people can bump into you and spin you out and ruin your race. I've had many races, the races are short, 3, 4, 6 laps, things like that. And I've definitely had laps where I've been in the podium position for the whole race, and then it gets down to the last lap, and I go into a corner a little bit too hard. I have to brake too late, and then the car behind me smashes into me and spins me around, and all of a sudden I'm in 18th place, which can be quite frustrating. But in the game, you can restart pretty quickly there if you want to, or just... it doesn't matter. It's fun. I mean, it's called Wreckfest. You're supposed to wreck. So there was one race where you're it's a track out in the country, and if you go off course, you can run into trees. There are some figure 8 tracks where, or even parts of tracks that are like figure 8, where you go around a circle, and then all of a sudden you're crossing where other cars are entering that circle. So there was one race where I think it was 6 laps long, and 2 laps into the race, each car you have HP each time, and you start at 100, and you go down to 0. You get to 0, you lose, or if you lose 2 of your tires, you lose. In the career mode, I'm playing just normal damage mode, which is a little bit more forgiving compared to realistic. If you play realistic and you lose a wheel, then, you can lose a wheel and it really impacts how well you can drive around the track. And if your engine starts going, it impacts how well your engine fires and things like that. With normal damage, you still get a lot of damage, but it goes a little slower and it doesn't quite impact your actual driving as much. So I've been doing that for the career mode right now. But anyway, I had a race where on the second lap, I was in a huge pile-up, and my car flipped, and I was down to like 7 hit points. I spent the next 3 laps avoiding any contact, and in this lap, this race was just it was the most destructive race I've been a part of, where just people were wrecking out all over the place, and really it's just kind of dodging because their wrecks just stay on the track. So I got around to the penultimate lap and going around this circle area that crosses where other cars are crossing, and as I go around that, a car plows in. No, a car. I swerve to miss a car, and then I plow into a tree, and that ends my race. But the race was so destructive that I ended up in 4th place, even though I crashed out. So that's anyway. The moment-to-moment gameplay is just fun. The online gameplay is fun. You really have to turn off that. It's a racing game. You want to win a race, but sometimes you're just going to smash things, and you're getting smashed into. And I've won races that I had no business winning. I've lost races that I should have won. And most of the time, I'm in the bottom half of the order, which is fine. You can still have fun. There's battles everywhere. The online for me has been a bit laggy, which is disappointing, but I'm hoping that gets figured out. The online's also pretty bare bones. You go in and you say, I want to run only races. You can run destruction derbies. You can run special races and have vehicles like buses and RVs and lawnmowers and things like that. But the game is it's bonkers. It's fun. And anybody who likes arcade racing, give it a go. Where I say it's arcade sim, there's all different classes of cars and models and weights and things like that. And depending on what car you're driving, it does change how you have to drive that car. If it's a heavier car, that has worse brakes, you've got to slow down sooner. And if you try and turn too fast, you might tip over. And the different surfaces between dirt and asphalt change how you have to drive. So it's a good game. I really enjoy it. I counted. So I think there are, just for the racing, not counting the destruction derby parts, but the racing, there are, I think, 20 different locations to race at. And within those 20 locations, there are 39 separate tracks, track layouts, I should say. And then that doesn't count there are many tracks that let you race them in reverse as well. So there are, not counting the reverse tracks, there are 39 racetracks in this game. Some of them are at the same environments as each other. But still, that's really a lot of variety for a game. Of course, none of the tracks are real locations. The cars aren't real, but they look real. The game looks good. Damage model's awesome, and I wholeheartedly recommend this game to anybody who enjoys racing games but doesn't want to get into quote-unquote serious racers like Gran Turismo, or even maybe Forza Motorsport, things like that. So, speaking of racing games, another thing that was announced kind of during my little, I won't call it a vacation, but time off from doing the podcast, Need for Speed Heat. The next game in the Need for Speed gaming universe, Need for Speed Heat, takes place basically in Miami. Looks like Miami Vice kind of graphics, things like that. The thing I did want to call out about this talks about the gameplay loop being tied to the day-night cycle. So in the daytime, you are racing legitimate races. You set up actual races, and there are sanctioned races, and you're earning money and building up money so that you can upgrade cars, things like that. And then you can switch to the nighttime, and at nighttime you're running illicit street races and kind of maybe the traditional Need for Speed kind of gameplay. And the more you do illegal street races, the more attention you get from police, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a could be a pretty neat gameplay loop where really they're trying to build it so that during the daytime you go and do races and you make money to upgrade your cars. That you go into the night and upgrade your player rep and your heat, which is a multiplier that gives you more experience and things like that. So I'm looking forward to it. I really have enjoyed playing Need for Speed Payback on EA Access. I didn't get super far into the story, but I got pretty far, and I might dive back into it, but then Wreckfest came out, so I do have some difficulty switching between too many different racing car models, because then you forget what your car can do as you're racing. So, and finally, before I dive into 989 Studios, I also wanted to touch on Insomniac Games. That came out in August, that Insomniac was officially becoming part of the PlayStation ecosystem, and that it just makes a lot of sense. A lot of games Insomniac has developed have been PlayStation exclusives, and they're a great studio. Spider-Man might well be the best PlayStation 4 game, period. And obviously best being subjective and whatever, but it's a great game, and I'm hopeful, for a lot of shooter fans, that Resistance could make a return, whether that's them enhancing the original games or coming out with a new Resistance or whatever. Those were great games. Hoping those can make a return, and then of course Spider-Man 2 has to be in development. And who knows what else? Ratchet and Clank, certainly, and then hopefully new IP also. I don't think you just buy a studio of Insomniac's caliber just looking to make the same games that they've always made. But I'm really, I think that's a great move. It's a great thing. Chances are Spider-Man 2 was already well in development before this purchase happened. And I'm thinking we could launch the PS5 with Spider-Man 2. That would be really cool. So, on to kind of what I wanted to do, and this is something I was working on a few weeks ago and really wanted to focus PSXP on this idea of exploring PlayStation's history. In looking at where to start, I don't know how I landed on 989 Studios, but I did. And I'm just gonna kind of dive in. So this is sort of like in our Patreon exclusive shows, we've got Arcadia Academia, which is a weekly look from Kevin and Caro, a weekly look back to some game in gaming history. And so this is kind of inspired by that idea. This week I'm going into 989 Studios. Every week I will not necessarily go into a whole studio. It might just be a game. It might be a specific creator or something. I'm not entirely sure. Flying by the seat of my pants here. But this week it's all about 989 Studios. So here is where I would enter. We would have some sort of theme music or something, but I don't. So anyway, here is the PSXP PlayStation History Moment of the Week. Dun, dun, dun. All right. 989 Studios is a label that Sony used to publish first-party games during the PS1 and PS2 eras, but the studio has roots that go back to 1989. I am going to focus, by the end of this, on 989 Sports, but I also want to do a rundown of their the studio's published games specifically, where we've got, I'm going to say Cool Borders, Cool Borders 3 and 4, Bust a Groove, Twisted Metal 3 and 4, and the Siphon Filters games. Which are all games that 989 Studios published, but maybe didn't directly develop. For me, as a PS1 gamer and kind of the gamer that I was in the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 eras, where I was really a sports gamer. I played other games, but I played sports games. 989 was famous for their sports games. And really, today's MLB The Show series is very much an offshoot or a further evolution of the 989 MLB series from the early 2000s. But I am going to start back in 1989, when the game studio CSG ImageSoft was born in January of that year in Los Angeles, owned by the CBS Sony Group, hence CSG. The initial focus was in publishing games for the Nintendo Entertainment System in the U.S. This is according to a 1989 article in PR Newswire. Their first game was Super Dodgeball, developed by Technos Japan and published in the U.S. by CSG. That game is currently available on Nintendo Switch's NES Online platform. Over the next year or so, CSG published a few other games, including the Movie Time developed side-scroller Dragon's Lair, which appears to have not been received very well. Sometime in 1991, the company rebranded itself as Sony ImageSoft after Sony established its North American division, Sony Electronic Publishing. In 1992, Sony began publishing games for Sega Genesis, Game Gear, and Sega CD, publishing Sewer Shark and Hook for the disc-based peripheral. As an aside, I played Sewer Shark as a kid. Actually at my granddad's house, he had it was a Sega Genesis, and then he had an attachment that went on the Sega Genesis that would play old Sega Master System games. So I loved Alex Kidd and some of the old Master System games, and then he also had the Sega CD that attached to it. So I played a number of Sega CD and Sega Master System and Sega Genesis games in the summers when I would go to his house. Sewer Shark is an on-rails shooter and was one of Sega CD's best-selling games, shipping 100,000 units before eventually being bundled with the Sega CD. It's listed on the AP's Top 10 Video Games of 1993. But for me, as an 8-year-old kid, 8-9 years old when I would have played that, it's FMV. It's like you're controlling a movie, which was of course the cool, quote unquote cool part of Sega CD. Everything was live action, things like that. Probably not everything, but that's what I remember. Ultimately, under the CSG and Sony ImageSoft moniker, the studio published 45-ish games from 1989 through 1995, when Sony restructured its gaming division as Sony Computer Entertainment of America. The studio was moved to Foster City and was renamed Sony Interactive Studios America just prior to the September release of the PlayStation 1 in the U.S. market. In 1998, the studio was rebranded again as 989 Studios. While the studio primarily published games, it also developed a number of games, such as the above-mentioned Twisted Metal games and many sports games. So it was a publishing arm for Sony, but they also developed their own games. I do want to stop for one moment here to talk about my sources for this show. First and foremost, Wikipedia. I know Wikipedia is not a primary source for anything, so any kids that happen to be listening to this and when you're doing reports for school, do not use Wikipedia as a source. But with Wikipedia, I used it largely as a way to track down original sources, such as that PR Newswire source from earlier. Some information of this has also come from old articles on Giant Bomb, IGN, and from a Sony press release itself. But information about 989's history isn't too easy to come by, so I'm using what is available. There hasn't been, if I go and actually one of my, maybe next week, my focus might be on Insomniac and Insomniac's history, but there's a whole history of Insomniac out there, I think written by Colin Moriarty, who also did History of Naughty Dog. So there's plenty of history about other Sony studios, but 989, there's not really. So that's where I'm getting this. Wikipedia, but then I use Wikipedia to look up the original sources that are linked into Wikipedia. And then also found some old articles myself on Giant Bomb, IGN, and Sony. Okay, so the rebranded 989 Studios' first game was developed by Sony Interactive Studios America and published by SCEA, was called ESPN Extreme Games. The series spawned 2 sequels, collectively called 1 Extreme, 2 Extreme, and 3 Extreme, after the ESPN license faded. In an era of games like Tony Hawk and Road Rash, I really remember enjoying the Extreme games. It featured skateboarding, rollerblading, mountain biking, and more. Played in a lot of ways like a Road Rash. It was a racing game where you could punch your competitors and knock them down. So those were fun games. I enjoyed those a lot. The development and publishing arm of the studio really kickstarted in 1998 with the rebrand to 989. Named for the studio's address at the time, 989 East Hillsdale, East, blah, 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 reset. The address, 989 East Hillsdale Boulevard in Foster City. In 1999, the studio's PC arm spun off as Variant Interactive and was also known as Sony Online Entertainment, as well before being spun off as Daybreak. But that's a different thing. You may have heard of Daybreak here within the last couple years and kind of what they have been working on. Going to do a quick run-through of 989 Studios' non-licensed game, covering 1995 through 2001. You had the 3 Extreme games that they actually developed. You had Bust-A-Groove, Cool Borders 2 and 3, Jet Moto 3, Rallycross 2, and the Siphon Filter trilogy, each of which 989 published. They also developed Twisted Metal 3 and 4. I consider Twisted Metal 2 to be one of my favorite PlayStation 1 games. I've never played 3 or 4. I do want to take a break and talk about Siphon Filter, which really was a pretty special series, pretty special game. Siphon Filter was developed by Eidetic Studios exclusively for PlayStation. Eidetic, of course, was bought by Sony and renamed Bend Studio. Bend developed Bubsy 3D and the Siphon Filter games for the PS1 through PS2 and PSP, before most recently releasing Days Gone on the PS4. So Siphon Filter was released in February of 1999 for the PS1, and is currently available on Android, PS3, and PSP. The game received a 9.5 from IGN at the time, and was pretty well received in general. Siphon Filter is a third-person action-adventure game following somewhat in the footsteps of Metal Gear Solid in its stealth-based action gameplay. The game follows protagonist Gabriel Logan and his partner as a series of biological outbreaks start happening through a virus called Siphon Filter. Despite some similarities to Metal Gear, Bend Studio creative director John Garvin told the PlayStation blog in 2012 that the game had been in development long before they'd heard of Metal Gear Solid. The idea originally came from a producer at 989 Studios who had written a one-page synopsis he called Siphon Filter, which had zero meaning, Garvin said. The goal was to make the player feel like a super spy and actually drew inspiration from GoldenEye on the N64. Now, me speaking personally, not John Garvin, this is what drew me to the game. I've long been a fan of the Mission Impossible movies and James Bond, and there wasn't really, yes, there was a Mission Impossible game on a couple games, I think, on PlayStation 1, but I didn't quite hit the mark. But that's kind of what drew me to Siphon Filter, that kind of spy kind of gameplay. Later in that PlayStation blog article, Garvin says that Siphon Filter was nearly canceled several times as it missed deadlines and revamped mechanics and story beats. They worked in crunch mode for about a year to get it perfected. In the first year, the game sold more than 1 million units, which was above expectations and called for a sequel. The team that made that original game was only 13 people. Alright, moving on from the studio's games, 989 Sports started publishing licensed sports games in 1998 with the Blitz-like NFL Extreme and the Sim Football Experience NFL Game Day. This was back when there were multiple options for pro football games. Actually, NFL Game Day 99, sometime around that era is when I got the Dreamcast, and so I was playing NFL 2K shortly thereafter. I didn't play many of the NFL Game Day games, but the series and Studio's other series were highly influential, and really a lot of 989 sports games, their impact is still seen today. So wanted to take a moment and look through some of those series. Looking at NFL Extreme, there were only 2 NFL Extreme games, and basically they weren't as good as NFL Blitz. So I guess that's all there is to say about that. Now, NFL Game Day 99. Next Generation was a site that looked at games back in the day, and they really enjoyed Game Day 99, rating it 5 stars out of 5. Had Terrell Davis on the cover. Sorry, I'm a Ohio native, Cleveland Cavs fan, and Minnesota Timberwolves fan, so I see Terrell. I think Terrell Brandon. Anyway, Terrell Davis was on the cover of that game. So all right, so Game Day, that's Game Day. I did want to take a minute. Here is a press release from 2000 that Sony released about Game Breaker, NCAA Game Breaker 2001. I want to read some of this press release because I think that it really fits into what football games and some sports game franchises started to do later on. Let's see. We've got NCAA Game Breaker 2001 recreates Saturday afternoons with mirror images of all 115 Division 1A football stadiums from Michigan's Big House to the Rose Bowl, all rendered in amazing detail that only the PlayStation 2 can produce. It had 20 bowl games. Hard to imagine when there was only 20 bowl games. There were 30 authentic fight songs and hundreds of motion-captured animations and so forth. I wanted to... where did that go? Sorry, I apologize for this. Total control passing was one of the things they talked about. Said players can adjust to changing defenses by leading or underthrowing receivers so the ball is placed just where the receiver can catch it. You know what you can do in Madden NFL 20? You can lead your receivers, and that's been around for a while now. And maybe Madden was doing that in 2001 as well. But that was a trademark. It's actually total control passing is trademarked here. Special moves allow game breakers to juke overmatched defenders, while a well-timed leap can tip the ball away from the outstretched hands of the intended receiver. A career mode allows player to assume the duties of a head coach, coordinator, or assistant in leading a run to the national championship. Players can then progress up the coaching ladder, landing jobs at higher profile schools depending on the success of their squad. Additionally, the gamers are able to save senior players from NCAA Game Breaker 2001 and draft them into the NFL by downloading them into 989 Sports Pro Football Release NFL Game Day 2001. I remember doing that with Madden, NCAA football into Madden, around the same era. But this just shows how influential and how, I don't know, if ahead of the time or with the times or whatever, Game Breaker was back then. They also included, in addition to the 115 current teams from that time, there were 64 classic teams from the past. They made a big stink about having Ron Dane involved, so whatever. Anyway, I thought that was kind of a neat look at what 989 was doing back in 2001 with their college football franchise, because really is a lot of features that were implemented into EA Sports NCAA football franchise later on, and even like 2K, NFL 2K, not NFL 2Ks, 2K Sports College Basketball Series. Had a lot of that coaching ladder where you start at the smallest school and then you can work your way up to the biggest school, which is really pretty cool. So then They also had an MLB series, Major League Baseball, from 98 up through 2006, which then eventually came to switched to the Sony San Diego and became MLB The Show once 989 Studios dissolved. 989 published Cool Borders 2001, which again was a snowboarding game. That was actually I believe the last game in the Cool Borders franchise. I remember when snowboarding games were all the rage. They also published a Formula One game, developed by Studio 33 and Sony Studio Liverpool. The PlayStation 2 version of the game was the first to support the Logitech GT Force racing wheel. It was the last simulation Formula One game to appear on the original PlayStation, and it was only on PlayStation and PlayStation 2. So it was published in North America by 989 Sports. So it is, going down through this, that was an exclusive game to PlayStation, and it's a Formula One game. They had exclusive MLB and NFL games. Excuse me. Some of their games also were published on PC at the time. Looking at, there's Athens 2004 game. It was published by Sony on PlayStation 2 and by IDOS Interactive for the PC. So that was kind of interesting. It was developed by Eurocom, and then again, it was a console exclusive to Sony, but also was on the PS2. It looks like it received mixed reviews. Not a great game. They also published NHL Face Off and Gretzky NHL 2005 before their eventual downfall. So you get to 2005, and there's a story actually published. So 2005, the games developed in 2004. Because sports games are generally released with the year ahead of them. So there's a story, May 5th, 2004, published on IGN. In a surprising announcement, Sony Computer Entertainment America and 989 Sports announced today that the NFL Game Day, NCAA Game Breaker, NBA Shootout, and NCAA Final Four franchises will be taking a season off. The statement reads as follows: "It's important to note that while our football and basketball titles will not be released this year, 989 Sports, MLB, and World Tour soccer franchises will continue. And 989 Sports will debut the officially licensed Athens 2004 game this summer and an all-new NHL hockey franchise in fall 2004 on an annual development cycle. In addition to the development of MLB, NHL, and World Tour soccer franchises for the 2004-2005 season, 989 Sports will continue to support the 989sportsonline.com for the existing product line as well as its new NHL franchise." So that came out in May 2004, and then later kind of that year it was over. The 989 brand was done, and they were kind of combined with some of their people moved down to San Diego, and continued that MLB The Show franchise, and from there it's kind of hard to see what they did next. But clearly, when they canceled their sports lineup for 2004, the writing was on the wall. So in 2004, when that press release came out, from that time on, Athens 2004 was released, MLB 2005 and 6 were released, NFL Game Day 2005 was the final release. It was only available on the PlayStation, was not on the PlayStation 2. which, for a game released in 2005, as we were getting ready for PlayStation 3 to come out, seemed pretty crazy. So that was kind of interesting as well. Clearly, that was the beginning of the end there. There was a game called Road to Sunday that was canceled in 2005. That was part of the fallout of EA Sports getting the exclusive rights to Madden, and the reason why everybody hates EA Sports today. It's a little bit of an overstatement there, but I very much remember when EA got the exclusive NFL license and how disappointing that was for me at the time. So Road to Sunday was canceled, a casualty of EA Sports and the exclusive NFL license there. NBA 2005 was only developed for the PSP. You had MLB 2006, and then you had the two Gretzky NHLs, 2005 and 2006, released in 2004 and 2005, if that's not confusing enough for you. And so that was the end of 989 Studios, 989 Sports, and 989 Studios. So certainly the fingerprints of those games are still around today. They published Siphon Filter through that brand. And Sony Bend Studios just released Days Gone, which by most accounts is a pretty good game. Maybe not great, but pretty good. And you've got the MLB The Show series still going strong. And then I would even posit that many of the things that they were working on in their other series are still alive in sports games today. So 989 Studios, really cool. A lot more history there going back to 1989 than I would have thought when I looked into this. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening. I hope that hope you learned something about 989 Studios. Like I said, I want to continue doing this in the future. I will dive into Insomniac at some point, whether that's next week or a later show, I'm not sure. And other than that, I hope that everyone has a great week and a great week of gaming. If you get Wreckfest for the PlayStation 4 home entertainment system, let me know. Shoot me a message. Add me as a friend. Seth is the GOAT on PlayStation. Maybe we can race and wreck into each other, or we can run into each other on Apex Legends, or whatever other future game comes out that we can connect with. So have a great week. Never stop gaming.
And though we may pledge fanboy allegiances to different flags, deep down inside we all serve one master, one king. And his name is gaming. Forever may he reign!